Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Rive to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. If you're a beginning investor, it can be really hard to figure out how to start investing, where to look for stocks, how to do research. So I wanted to do a video about how to get going, where to get ideas, and the path that I often start with when I'm researching a stock. Now, one thing that you can do as an investor is follow other people who are doing a lot of research. That's what I'm doing here on Rive Investing. So if you're interested in getting your investing journey going, subscribe to Rive Investing. I will try to provide as much insight as I can on the markets and individual stocks. And give this video a like and share it with anybody you think would be interested in it. So let's start with the search engine. This is where a lot of us start all kinds of investing searches. So let's go to a stock screener that I like that's called FinViz, Finviz. This is a screener that's really powerful. It's got a lot of information here, but you can distill it down pretty easily. I'm going to go to this screener page here, and we're going to find two stocks that fit a criteria that I'm looking for, and then I'll show you how to dig into those stocks a little bit more. Let's start with looking for a dividend stock. I want to look for a dividend stock that pays over a 5% dividend yield. That's a pretty high dividend yield, but that's what I'm looking for in this search right here. And then let's go to fundamentals. I want to have not only a stock that pays a dividend, but a stock that makes money and is a value stock. So low price to earnings multiple. I'm going to say under 15. And I want to have a low forward price to earnings multiple too. What that'll do, we'll screen out some companies that have had one-time earnings in the past year that may not be sustainable. So this includes what forward estimates are for earnings from analysts. So maybe not the best metric, but if we say under 15, hopefully it'll screen out some of those companies that are not real sustainable. Now from here, you're going to get a list of a ton of companies. 170 companies is what's showing up here. And a lot of them are really small. There's some that are, 40, $60 million in market cap. I actually don't want to look at those companies at all. I want to start the other direction, because if I'm a beginning investor, I'm not trying to hit home runs. I just want to get going with maybe some more solid investments. So let's sort these by market cap with the largest companies first. And the two that I'm going to dig into today are Verizon and Intel. These are probably both companies that you have heard of. Verizon is a major wireless carrier in the US. I think a really good value stock right now. We'll get into why I like that company. And then Intel is a chip manufacturer that is running into a lot of challenges. So it's a value, it's paying a good dividend, low price to earnings multiple, but it may not be a stock that belongs in your portfolio as a beginning investor. So I'll get to that as well. From here, let's go back to Google. And the next thing I'm going to look up is the company's investor relations page. So let's start with Verizon. And you can see here, this is one of the things that pop up. Investor relations page is the page that companies put press releases and all kinds of information that investors need. With Verizon here, we're going to go there and look at their quarterly earnings. They have these set out in each quarter, and then under each of these tabs, they have all of the information that you might need. The webcast, so you can listen to that, then infographic, a full presentation, and these are the financial statements. I'm going to come back to this, but what I'm going to look up here is this presentation. The other tab that I'm going to open up is SEC filings. So I'm just going to say Verizon, SEC filings. And right here, oftentimes what companies will do, will have their own page that has SEC filings, and then there's a common searches or filters that you can use on these pages. So we'll go into all of the company's SEC filings. This will be everything that the company has filed, but I want to look specifically for quarterly reports. So 10Q is quarterly reports, 10Ks are annual reports. After annual earnings start coming out later in January and then into February, you might want to search for 10Ks. But right now, I want to look at the last quarterly report. So 10Qs is what I'm going to search for. And you can see that on October 25th, 2022, they filed a 10Q for the third quarter of 2022. And I'm going to open that with the PDF. This is the filing the Verizon files with the SEC with all of their financial statements, all kinds of background on their business. This is a baseline piece of information that every investor should know. And I want to go through a couple of things that we want to look for that are going to be common among any company that you're looking at The first is the financial statements. So you could click on any of these and find the statements of income, comprehensive income, different way of stating some of the income statement that some companies do, the balance sheet, and then cash flows. So the income statement, balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows, those are the common statements that are going to be on any SEC filing for a quarterly or annual report. Let's just go into the statement of income. This will dig down into what revenue is, usually breaks it down into a couple of components. Costs, so you can look at what cost of goods sold is and get gross margins and operating margins, and then any financing costs that go on top of that. So for Verizon's example, for the 9 months ended September 30th, 2022, they have paid $2.5 billion in interest expense this year. That's a big expense for them because they've spent so much money borrowing money to buy spectrum to build out their wireless network. So that's something to consider with this company as we go forward. Also gets to net income. So what is net income? What is net income? What's the trend here? You can see that their earnings are declining right now. I'll cover that in just a second. And then the other piece to always look at is the balance sheet. This will start with assets, and you're going to start with current assets, which are things like cash and accounts receivable. And then there are things like inventory, prepaid expenses, other assets that are on the balance sheet. These are the current assets. That's that line item right here. Longer term assets are things like property, plant, and equipment. And that's where you're going to have, this is actually this number, the $300 billion minus $200 billion is where you get this $103 billion of net property, plant, and equipment for them. And then all kinds of other items here on the left that you can see. Wireless licenses is a big one for Verizon. They have almost $150 billion in value on the balance sheet for the wireless spectrum that they have purchased licenses for. So that's something to note. And then the big number that I want to look at here for Verizon is long-term debt. So long-term debt right now, $133 billion. And then you also want to add in the current liabilities. So there is going to be often a debt item on the current liability side because that's debt that is maturing within 1 year. Right now, that's $15 billion for them. So for a company like Verizon, one of the risks is that this is a very high debt company because they have to install so many assets to build out their wireless network. The final thing to look at on this sheet for now is the statement of cash flows. What this is going to do is go from the net income number to cash provided by operations, investing, and financing activities. You can see here in the first 9 months of the year, $15 billion in net income. We're going to add back depreciation, a couple other items here, subtract out other net, and you get cash from operations was actually over $28 billion. What is happening with investing? Well, their capital expenditures was $15.8 billion over that period of time, acquisition of wireless licenses, collateral payments for derivative contracts. There was $23.3 billion of cash consumed by investing activities. And then financing activities for a company like Verizon's, this is going to be proceeds from long-term debt, $4.6 billion. But then they also have a repayment of long-term debt, $8 billion. So you can actually go back and see that debt is falling over the past year, which is a positive trend, maybe not quite as much as I would like, but that's something to keep an eye on for a company like Verizon. Let's go back up here and look at the other thing that I always want to look at with a SEC filing, and that's management's discussion and analysis of financial conditions and results of operations. What this is going to be is a section where management describes their business. And there might be a few different reasons that you want to look at this. One reason is to figure out how a management thinks about the company. What do they see their market as or their long-term mission as? Another thing is there are often details that you want to find in this discussion. So how does a company account for revenue? What exactly are the pieces of revenue? You know, a great example is ChargePoint, which is a really popular stock. It's a EV charging company, but you actually look at this discussion about how they make money and you realize that they're not actually making money by selling electricity to people who have their cars plugged into chargers that the company has all over the world. They're actually making most of their money by just simply selling the charger itself. So that's the kind of details that you want to dig into in this. And sometimes you can get really good nuggets from just reading a few pages of management's discussions here. So they go into a few operating trends. This is something that I think investors should keep an eye on with a company like Verizon. Revenue is going up, but operating income and net income is going down. So those are things that we'll want to dig into with the presentation in just a second. But there's often a lot of really good information in this management discussion piece. So that's always something I think is worth looking at. All right, let's close out of this SEC filing and go back to the investor relations site. The presentation is something that we always want to take with a little bit of a grain of salt, because it's management trying to basically sell you as an investor that their stock is going to be really valuable. Verizon is doing exactly that, but they have to actually show numbers as well. So that's why I think this is really important. And this really shows the operating trends of the business. You can see they just start with earnings per share and then how they calculate adjusted earnings per share. That's often a number that's used. So good to have that up front. And then the progress they made in the quarter. Again, this is sort of their sales pitch to investors. Here's what we're doing financially, operationally, and with the network. And then here's where we get to the operating metrics. This is the first thing that I look at when Verizon's quarterly report comes out, because this will tell you how many customers are signing up, what their churn is. This is actually the chart here that's given Verizon a lot of challenges. This is the reason to be really skeptical of the stock. You can see that a year ago, they were actually adding customers at a pretty rapid clip, and that has fallen off a cliff in 2022. We have a net negative number of wireless postpaid net adds over the last 3 quarters. And one challenge here is that churn is going up. That's the number of customers that are canceling every quarter. So this is something to keep in mind if you're looking at a company like Verizon. One thing that has actually made me really bullish on Verizon as an investment is this page right here. This is their broadband numbers. Now, for a really long time, broadband was specifically fiber optics and DSL. That's this red piece right here. But you can see that over the last year, fixed wireless, this gray box, has just exploded. So that is a 5G wireless router that you can put in your home or business, just simply plugs into the wall and replaces cable internet or fiber optic internet. Really simple to use. I've been using it for almost a year now. And this is one of the reasons that I started looking into Verizon stock again. I was like, this is a great addition to connecting my smartphone. Now I can actually get home internet wirelessly as well. And for areas that it's available, which it's growing really quickly, maybe this is a great growth opportunity for Verizon. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the numbers right here. 377,000 net adds last, and that continues to go up and up. This is the breakdown of consumer net adds and business net adds. So this is one that I think investors should keep an eye on. Maybe the mobile the mobile number not being great is something to be a little bit bearish, but this is maybe offsetting that and is a little bit more bullish for a company like Verizon. And then the next one here, if Verizon is ever going to really turn around from a stock standpoint and not just be a value stock, but actually be something of a growth stock, they're going to have to figure out their value market. So a little bit better number last quarter. If we see that continue to improve, maybe that will help the stock going forward, but their revenue per customer is also going down as well. So that's a little bit concerning. But these are the kind of things that you want to look at overall for Verizon, and they give you this information right there on the investor relations page. Here's a breakdown, total revenue, and then wireless revenue. So wireless revenue is growing much more quickly than total at Verizon. So another thing to keep in mind. This is just a quick overview of Verizon, and I think it will hopefully give you the places that I usually start from an investment perspective, and how I got there from a screener as well. Now let's go back to the search engine and look at the other stock that we talked about, Intel. We're going to go to the investor relations page again, open that up. And I'm not going to go to the SEC filing on this one, but I do want to go to, they have this broken out in latest financial results. And here again, they have the same information that Verizon had. It's always nice when they have their prepared remarks. This is when they have conference calls, so you can actually get the text of that. But I'm going to go to the presentation put out, because I think this pretty quickly gets you to the point where maybe there's a couple of red flags with Verizon, but there's some real warning signs with Intel that make me a little bit more cautious on this stock. So it just goes through the leadership. Again, executive summary. Here's the pitch that they're giving to investors and what they want you to buy into. And it's really about transformation. That's the theme with Intel as they try to change their business model. But they're already starting to warn you, industry outlook, there's going to be cyclical slowdown. So, but they say that they have long-term sustainable demand. We will see if that's true long-term. laying out their strategy again. Hey, here's what we're doing to try to turn our business around. Remember, they used to be a vertically integrated chip company, and then they really got crushed over the last decade by Taiwan Semiconductor, who is just a foundry and allows a whole bunch of other companies to design their own chips. And then TSMC just does the production of the chip itself. So really broke up Intel's model of Intel designing the chips and Intel producing the chips. That's why they've really fallen off the wayside. And I'll get to what that looks like from a financial perspective in a second. And then here's their strategy to accelerate that transformation and kind of the goals that they have. These are items that you can look at now and then see how they perform against them over the long term. But the financial highlights is really where things get kind of questionable for a company like Intel. Revenue down 15% year over year. Gross margin down 12.4 points year over year. And they're going into each operating segment here, just like we did with Verizon. Client computing, revenue is down 17%. Operating income down 54%. Data centers, revenue down 27%. Operating income down 99%. Network and Edge Group, maybe this is the only one there's a bright spot. Revenue is up 14%, but operating income got crushed and was down 87%. So the story is really starting to show here with Intel. Yes, this is a value stock. Yes, it has a high dividend yield, but maybe the operations aren't as good as they seem by just looking at something like a screener. So that's why investors really want to look at these screeners as something that's going to give you an idea of where to start looking for a stock that fits into a particular category and into that screen. But then you still have to do the work of going in and saying, does this investment still make sense for me? So to just give a quick recap here for beginning investors, I think a really good place to start is doing a screen. So are you looking for value stocks? Are you looking for growth stocks? Are you looking for stocks in energy or technology? You can do all those things with a relatively simple screen. And then digging into the investor relations page, earnings, press releases, and presentations, and then also SEC filings. Those are going to be really important to have all of the details that are conveniently left out oftentimes by management, all the risks that exist in a business. Those are going to be two things you definitely want to look at. And then follow people that you trust as well. Hopefully you will do that with Rive Investing by subscribing here on YouTube. But there are a lot of really great resources to look at online, both written form and videos. So I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of how to look at investments as a beginner. If you have any comments or questions, leave those in the comment section below. I will get to those as soon as I can. Like I said, subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you here next time.